Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Mohammed Mokaev, or Holding On to Survive, Jack Slack, and it's the Jack Slack podcast. Holy shit. What an awful weekend of fights. If you missed it, I was live tweeting the entire thing because they were on at a normal time. I was going to say I could do this more because we're seeing more London events now, but I suspect we're back to the one every 2 years situation because of these fights. Oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god. Well, I mean, what can I say? Let's tear these fuckers apart because it was, abysmal for the most part. Now, I missed the first two fights. I hopped in at Jai Herbert, and I hopped in towards the end of Victoria Leonardo versus Mandy Bohm, and people were saying, this is boring, the previous fight wasn't good, blah, blah, blah. I hope this picks up soon. I made the mistake of saying, it's all right, guys. Jai Herbert's normally quite good fun. Comes out in the first round against Kyle Nelson. Actually, no, we'll do that in a minute. Let's do the main event first, because that's going to be what people are here for, aside from Paddy and Molly McCann. But main event was the peak of this just abysmal card. Not really, because a lot of these fighters fought boring. There's no way around that. Mohammed Mokaev, Jai Herbert, Marc all fought very boring. Tom Aspinall came out and tried to save the night by throwing a hard low kick right off the bat. Wasn't checked. Hit the man in the thigh. Curtis Blades took the kick in the thigh. Tom Aspinall's shin didn't break. His knee dislocated. So, one of the weirdest injuries. Horrible misfortune. Obviously, Tom Aspinall heartbroken that the fight ended that way. Curtis Blades heartbroken that he didn't even get to punch the man to get the win. You're not getting a title shot off this one. They're not going to be able to do an immediate rematch, because Tom Aspinall's going to spend the next half year, I imagine, mastering his bodyweight quarter squat on one leg. Just the shittest ending possible, and not even a shit ending that you could then go, okay, well, we'll move on and we'll get something different done quickly, like Matt Mitrione kicking Sergei Haratonov in the dick. Nope, this is having repercussions for Tom Aspinall, and it's Curtis Blades who has to seek a quick turnaround to try and prove that he deserves to move up the rankings or get some forward momentum in his career. I mean, at least he gets his pay and he gets the win bonus, but show and win money. But yeah, no one was happy about this at all. But let's take it back to my experience with the card. I came in, my own lived experience. I came in at the Jai Herbert fight. I said, this will be fun at least. Jai Herbert doesn't do a lot, but he has a wicked 1-2, lovely high kick. That's enough to get fights done. Kyle Nelson comes out of the gate, surprises him, lovely body kick, made Herbert wince a little bit. They ended up in the clinch, and Nelson's bashing him with elbows. And I'm thinking, don't you train with Leon Edwards? This is his thing. How are you still getting chinned with elbows all the time? But eventually, Jai Herbert starts to pick it up. Round 2, throws some punches, looking good. Gets a takedown, does nothing with it. Round 3 comes out, gets the takedown, does nothing with it. And this was going to become a theme. So he holds on, he gets the decision win in front of the hometown crowd with no damage and little excitement. And you're thinking, okay, well, not all the British fighters will be fighting like that, because obviously it's the home crowd. It'll G them up, ready to go. Mohammed Mokaev comes out next against Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson's hair, I called it Daffy Duck's beak when it got slapped and spun round to the back of his head. He had a yellow beard on the back of his head, basically. But I didn't know anything about Johnson coming in. People who watch LFA, and whose opinions I respect, people like Opposer, were saying that he'd been the champion there, I think, or something like that, but he'd had 3 or 4 fights there, and they'd all been absolute bangers. So I went, this couldn't possibly not be fun. And Mohammed Mokaev came out first 10, 15 seconds. It looked like he wanted to take this guy's head off. And you go, nice, great start. And then he gets a takedown, and Johnson immediately springs up. And it became very clear over the course of the fight that Johnson was very good at jumping back to his feet. And Mokaev kept taking him down and not controlling him. And then the guy would get back up, and he'd be on a back body lock, and he'd be trying to put in one hook, and he wouldn't be punching, he wouldn't be looking for a submission. He didn't really do anything. And this is where, any judging criteria, there are going to be really strange ways that it can actually work out if you go by the letter of it. So a lot of times people will talk about, whoever comes the closest to a finish. And I refer them to a pride fight where someone just dominated for 14 minutes. And they weren't not hitting. They were doing some damage and they're adding up blows and stuff. And then the other guy will land one good punch that wobbles him. And you're going, well, none of the guy who dominated punches wobbled his opponent. Do you give it to the guy who landed the one good punch because he came closest to finishing it? But this is another weird one because we're supposed to prioritize damage, and then we're also supposed to not be swayed by takedowns unless they lead to something. The top control has to be damage or submission threat. Now, of course, when you get into submission threat, there are lots of ways you can game that too. There was a thing in the IBJJF jiu-jitsu competitions in the gi for a while where you could get an advantage by jumping on a quote-unquote ankle lock. You're going for a straight foot lock, but you're not really going for it. But you're getting your advantage. And then that's not a point, but if there's no points scored, and that's what's the case in a lot of IBJJF matches at the high level, you've got the advantage from pretending you were going for a leg lock. I think they've since changed that rule, but, it's there are submission attempts and then there are submission attempts is what I'm saying. But Mokaev very clearly didn't do anything to try and finish or hurt this man. He was so concerned with keeping control, and the thing was that he wasn't really in control. You can say how impressive it is. Whenever someone wins a boring decision, I think of that guy who did an interview afterwards and was getting booed, and he said, I just held down a grown-ass man. Do you know how hard that is? And he didn't even hold down a grown-ass man. He mat returned him, and then the guy jumped back up with no difficulty and never in danger. And then, when you're talking about damage and submission attempts, Johnson, with his elbows, as bullshit as they were, elbows to the thigh, he landed a couple to the head, which were good, but, as bullshit as they were, he actually struck. Mokaev didn't. He attempted a guillotine later on, where he got far closer than anything Mokaev attempted, because Mokaev didn't attempt anything. So people were asking me, are you not impressed by it? And I'm going, well, he didn't even hold him down. The guy just kept jumping up. And I also tweeted during this fight, I slag off Khabib's fans a lot. I take the piss out of Khabib's fans a lot. And I take the piss out of standum of anyone Dagestani related to Khabib. But the thing that I loved about Khabib, and the thing that made Khabib special, everyone's focusing on the Dagestani handcuff, the riding of the ankles along the fence, the mat returns, the things that he did that were the technical grappling bits. But the thing that made Khabib was that he was always hitting. I've had conversations with friends who don't really follow MMA that closely, and they'll say, Khabib, he's boring, just wants to lay on people. And you're going, no, watch him next to someone who actually is known for laying on people. Khabib always was punching, always was looking to hurt people. And he was in positions where you couldn't get a lot of weight behind the punch because you couldn't move your body weight. So when he had Michael Johnson along the cage and he's sitting on his ankles and he's got his own head pressed into Michael Johnson's collarbone. But he's still throwing the arm punches as hard as he can. And it's making a good thud. And you're going, well, respect Khabib. I don't think he ever lost sight of the fact that he's in a fist fight, Whereas this was just some takedowns. that was literally it. Not even some takedowns into effective top control. Not even smothering domination. Just some takedowns and then some stand-ups. To me, control is getting someone into a position where you can start hurting them. I don't think you're in control if you're afraid to let go of the guy, if all four limbs are occupied in clinging to this man and trying to hang on his back. That's like sitting in your car with the handbrake on and the foot pedal brake pressed down and be like, I've got control of the vehicle, guys. We're not going anywhere. Fortunately, the card was briefly saved by the first non-British person on the card, or the first fight with no British people in. And I don't know if it was saved by Jonathan Pearce being good or by Amirkhani being the same person he's always been and never learning. Literally before this fight, I tweeted out, the funniest thing in MMA is always Amirkhani gassing out in the second round. As he's on the stool in the first round, I tweet, he's going to do it. And then he comes out and does it. Oh, it's so good. First round Amirkhani, genuinely terrifying. Grabbing onto single legs, trying to dump you. Amazing front headlock work, anacondas, darces, really a massive submission threat. Plus, the leaping right hook, which is his only stand-up technique, works pretty well in the beginning when he's not tired. Unfortunately, he grabbed a hold of Jonathan Pearce, and Jonathan Pearce did a great job of staying off the mat. As a southpaw, Amirkhani throws the right hook and then ducks into the single leg on the opponent's left leg. Single leg with the head inside. And this is something we're always getting into in MMA about head inside versus head outside takedowns, or shooting under the opponent or around the opponent, basically. But the head inside single, as you come up to your feet and pick up the leg, your head is on their tummy and they can smash it like an otter smashing a clam with a rock. This is the way to look at it. We're going to call that the otter's belly elbow now. But basically, Jonathan Pearce bends over at the waist so that when he raises his arm above his head, it can come in at 90 degrees into the side of Amirkhani's head, the elbow. And he hammers him with loads of those, opens a big cut. Amirkhani obviously wobbled and in trouble. He stumbles around on this single, goes to his knees and comes back up. Still managed to threaten, I believe it was a anaconda choke, but Pearce kept a nice low underhook on Amirkhani's leg to stop his own arm being dragged in. With the anaconda and the dast, they're arm triangle chokes, so the closer if your elbow is drawn across your center line, it brings your shoulder closer to your neck, which means that the choke's going to go on. So typically with dastes and anacondas, you want to try and, if you can put the opponent between your arm and your center line, if you just doggedly keep an underhook, a lot of the time, unless they've got very long arms, you can keep that head and arm from getting as bad as it should or could. The other one is just to go belly down and starfish out. The old Greco-Roman grappling. If you want to get into wrestling in anticipation of getting into grappling or MMA, they always say Greco-Roman's the best, but Greco-Roman parterre is the most boring shit in the world. Everyone just goes belly down starfish, and the other person is supposed to try and lift him up. If you remember the Carolyn lift, I don't know, he wasn't Greco-Roman, he was it freestyle, folk style, whatever. But the Carolyn lift is kind of like, and I was thinking this during that Mokaev fight, the Carolyn lift is kind of like what Mokaev was doing, in that it's technically impressive to lift someone up and put them back on the mat in a different position. But if you don't do anything with it, it doesn't mean anything. It's not impressing anyone. You don't get points for it. It's a lot of effort for literally no damage. But anyway, back to this fight. Jonathan Pearce scrambles around with Amirkhani, defends the takedowns well. Great work fighting off the single leg, always looking for that elbow to the head, which is such a powerful weapon in takedown defense. Amirkhani never switches off the single, doesn't really go for anything else, doesn't come up into clinches and look for trips or anything like that, or push him to the fence very effectively. But then the round ends, and you know that Amirkhani is about to gas. So round 2, he comes out. He actually cracks him with a couple of right hooks just because Jonathan Pearce was getting so carried away with himself. But Jonathan Pearce gets to work striking, carries his pinky out like Bruce Lee. Very classy way to strike. And immediately on the break, it was in the first round, and immediately on the break from one of these grappling exchanges, he threw a front snap kick to the stomach. I was like, oh yeah, he knows. He's seen Amirkhani's a massive gasser. Well, everyone has now. You know, if you're not so outmatched by him in the grappling that you get submitted in the first round, which is, if you have fairly similar grappling ability to someone, not getting submitted immediately isn't the hardest thing in the world. Normally it takes people time to submit people. And if it takes time to submit people, or time to finish people, surely work on your cardio a bit, you know? I just don't understand, because when he was at SBGI, with John Kavanagh, it was sort of a meme because everyone at that camp seems to struggle with cardio. But he's now at his own camp. He's got his own camp. He's got his own gym, I believe. And he's still not worked out that you need to be able to fight at least 2 rounds. I always slagged on Claudia Gadelha for having 1.5 rounds of cardio. But she always survived to the end of the fight, which is how you win the decision. If you dominate 1 round and then you immediately lose, you're going to win 1 in every 3, like Amirkhani has recently. But the second round of this was just brutal. It was largely just Amirkhani laying in a ball, too tired to get up. And Jonathan Pearce, to his credit, he's dropping blows on him and trying to get the stoppage by just, this guy isn't doing anything. But then he starts digging some knees to the body on the ground as well. It reminded me a lot of the Burgos Amirkhani fight, where Burgos takes him down in the second round and gets to a mounted crucifix or a side crucifix, whatever you want to call it. The old Khabib position, the old Valentina Shevchenko position. She's made it famous, not Khabib, where you trap the opponent's arm beneath your knee, so you can elbow them in the head. But Burgos switches it over. Instead of hitting the head, he uses the other hand to control Amirkhani's free hand and just starts punching the belly. And Amirkhani looks like he wants to die. It's just so funny. Only time I've ever seen that done, but. Yeah, if you've got a massive gasser, hit him in the body. So JSP, Jack Slack's penis, he almost saved the card, and then we went back to just bad fights. However, actually, no, it was JSP, and then the fight after that was Nathaniel Wood versus Charles Rosa. Nathaniel Wood coming back from a little layoff. He's gone up to featherweight from bantamweight, I believe. And he looked sensational. He looked fast as hell, which seems to be the case when people go up, especially strikers generally. If you go up in weight, you run amok with your speed advantage, provided you can deal with the wrestling. Now, Rosa, not an amazing fighter by any means, but a tough guy and looked absolutely bamboozled. I also thought that I saw a bit more to Nathaniel Wood than I have previously, which I thought was good, because I felt like the last few times I watched him, he relied too much on that shifting, stepping right hand, which he did good work with, but it was becoming almost Dustin Poirier when he's only shifting-esque. This fight, he was doing wonderful work off both stances, brilliant combination work, hand speed was blinding. He was doing a beautiful jab where it was a galloping jab. Well, I've called two things a galloping jab before. There's the one that we talked about in the Mantequilla article, but the one that he was doing was back foot comes up underneath you, and then you push off into a jab. So you're making more ground. And if you're fast enough, and he does seem to be fast enough at this weight class, that's a great way to cover some distance and get to people quicker. He landed that a good few times in this fight. Also used a right front kick to the body to shift into southpaw and start combination punching from there. I thought that was brilliant. I'd never seen him do that before. And then for the most part, he was just butchering Rose's lead leg with low kicks below the knee into the calf. And Rosa looked very troubled by that. He had to change stances at many points in this fight. There were moments when Nathaniel Wood threw him from the clinch with a foot sweep or a osatagari or something like that, and Rosa would go to stand up from the bottom, and to stand up, you do like a Turkish get-up. You sit up onto one hand, the opposite foot bases on the floor, while you pick your bum and your free foot up and stand up. Which means the one foot has to be out in front of you, basing on the floor. And he did that in the second round, and his left foot was in front of him, so he got up on his right hand. And Nathaniel Wood punted that leg, and he stumbled back to standing. But then in the third round, he ended up on the floor about 3 times. Every single time, he turned onto his left hand so that his not injured right leg was in front of him as he did the stand-up. And it meant that he just wasn't collapsing every time that Nathaniel Wood kicked him in the leg while he stood up. So thank you to Nathaniel Wood for giving us one of the few entertaining fights of the night. I thought he looked sensational. Really excited to see him against some other featherweights. Honestly, bantamweight is a class full of strikers with a really active and murderous top 10, where featherweight is a weird weight class that's in sort of a slump where most of the top 10 fighters aren't fighting very much and will probably start losing to unranked guys soon, or guys who aren't ranked yet. Guys like Evloev shooting up through the rankings. I feel like Nathaniel Wood could probably do more damage as a very, very fast, skilled striker at featherweight than he might as just another of the great strikers at bantamweight. So then it was time for D1 KZ. Marc Chikaze. I called it beforehand. I said, I feel like we're going to get wrestler Chikaze. And then he came out and I went, oh, Jesus, he's wearing the knee sleeves, which is a telltale sign someone's going to wrestle. If you remember Paul Craig, who was it he was trying to take down? He just tore his knees, the skin over his knees, wide open. He's just leaving a blood trail along the cage. But, yeah, Damir Hadzovic, not a great grappler. I don't know what it is he does do, but, Renato Moicano humiliated him on the ground, and Moicano's decent on the ground, but he's not amazing by any means. But yeah, immediately Marc Diakiese shoots, goes all the way to his knees, comes up in a double, takes him down, and fucking sits on him. It was the same as with Mokaev. You saw all the same innovations that Khabib Nurmagomedov and his team showed. None of the fucking hitting in between. Headbutted him, open a cut, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if we got a no contest here? Speaking of no contests, Lorenz Larkin fought some scary Russian guy on the Bellator card, and it was a pretty good fight actually while it lasted, because the Larkin backed him up towards the fence. The guy cracked Larkin with a counter right hook, shot in on his legs, and took him all the way to the opposite side of the cage and sat him down. And Larkin starts sitting up. You know, Larkin's very good at counter wrestling, so he starts working his way up. He digs a quick elbow, you know, one of the ones we were talking about earlier with JSP. And it's just a little bit too close to the back of the head. It was the kind of shot that you've seen not called at all before. Emil Meek versus that lad. Glover Teixeira versus Carl Robertson. You know, dudes get elbowed square in the back of the head all the time and nothing is said. But one elbow, the ref stops the fight as if to warn him while he's still in position. And the Russian guy flops to the ground, clutching at the back of his head. And he so clearly thought he was getting a DQ. And he got a no contest out of it. It's so funny. But yes, Diakiese opened up Hadzovic with a headbutt. I was hoping we would get a no contest, but they went right back to it. When they hit the feet in round 2, or towards the end of round 2, I think it was, Diakiese, it looked like Hadzovic was 1, tired, and 2, having trouble seeing out of his eye, because Diakiese just teed off on him for about 5 seconds. And then it was back to wrestling again. And round 3 was take him down and do no damage again. You know, Marc Diakiese's not even the most interesting fighter in the world on the feet, but at least on the feet, he was doing something towards hurting people. This fight was literally just holding the man. Which is even weirder because I've seen Hadzovic get easily submitted before, so what is you doing? I mean, clearly working with All-Stars has improved Marc Diakiese's wrestling a lot, but again, what is the point in doing it if you're not going to score any damage or try to accumulate some damage? You know, damage is something you can't accurately see from the outside, but if you're hitting someone in the head, you're causing damage. And if you're not, you're not. Ludovic Klein versus Mason Jones was more like an actual fight, but still kind of shite. Volkan Oezdemir versus Paul Craig was weird, because Paul Craig was running after him, entering on takedown attempts and using them to pull guard, and then trying to reap a leg or whatever. Had some success with it in the early going, but I was about to say Oezdemir got sweatier, but unrelated to this fight, I saw 2 fighters on this card with visible injection sites on their abdomen, which is so dope to do that under USADA, turn up with a big old lump sticking out of you, where you've clearly injected something. It's like Gordon Ryan takes photos with infected injection sites all over his stomach. But I'll let you work out who they were. And then another fighter who was suspiciously greasy from very early on. But obviously Paul Craig had a hard time holding on to him as the rounds went on. Just the weirdest fight in the world, because Oezdemir landed a couple of big shots on the feet. Paul Craig never looks like he takes a shot well. But something about Alonzo Menifield knocking him out destroyed the part of his brain that allows him to be knocked out. It's called Arlovsky syndrome, and it's quite rare. But you can actually get knocked out so much that you're unknockoutable. But for the most part, Paul Craig, like, the first round was Paul Craig desperately pursuing takedowns. And I'm going, just throw some fucking kicks, you know, because Paul Craig actually does decently when he kicks and just uses his hands to frame off people. You know, think of John Jones, Aljamain Sterling, all those guys who don't have great hands, don't have great head movement, but because they're long and gangly and decent kickers, they can pile up the points, have something as a threat on the outside, and keep themselves relatively safe from counters. So in the second and third round, Paul Craig actually has some success on the feet because Volkan Oezdemir won't hit him. And then when they hit the mat and Paul Craig's on the bottom of guard, where he's always getting hit in the face, Oezdemir won't hit him. It's just... I mean, Oezdemir won the decision, but I would have loved it if the judges didn't give him the decision, because all he did was stop takedowns and land the odd shot, while Paul Craig was spazzing out, pulling guard, spazzing out on the feet. And, yeah, I don't know what the actual fight stats were, but watching it, you're going, why is Oezdemir not landing any fucking punches? So then, one of the few good moments of the night was Molly McCann versus Hannah Goldie. I was under the impression Hannah Goldie was a wrestler, but she didn't look like she knew how to do anything in this one. I joked that she had to rebound quickly after losing on the pads in that pre-fight footage of her backstage, but she came out and she had no idea how to deal with the striking. She clearly, not her strength. And Molly McCann, a lot of her trouble has been on the ground and in the wrestling. She moves well, she boxes well. She's never been a huge hitter, but she was just landing for free on Goldie, and Goldie was really reacting badly, the sort of curling up in a ball and then trying to push the person away with your hands. Goldie goes to the fence. Molly McCann follows her to the fence, hits the spinning elbow, which is the perfect time. We're talking about this all the time with like Ricardo Ramos. If you go for spinning elbows all the time, you're going to miss them all the time. The time to hit spinning techniques is 1, when the opponent's definitely coming towards you, and 2, when they're on the fence. So Molly McCann goes in, ducks down, turns into the elbow, and finishes with punches against Hannah Goldie. Really, I mean, incredible, because people score like one knockout with something and then they think that they're going to do that forever. Dong Hyun Kim scored one back fist on a back elbow, and then the next fight he just spun the whole time until he got hit in the back of the head while spinning by Tyron Woodley. But Molly McCann didn't throw any spinning elbows until she had her along the fence and she went for it. So she happened to score the same knockout twice, or the same, with the same weapon for a stoppage twice. But she was fighting well. She was fighting cleverly against someone who looked completely outmatched on the feet. And in fairness, Goldie grabbed a leg a couple of times, and Molly McCann didn't seem to have a lot of trouble with it. And then Molly McCann did an interview and put Marc Jacasey on blast and all the other boring fighters like Jai Herbert. Respect to her. You know, she says some daft things about how like the UFC's pay structure is actually very fair, and it's really nice that they fly her out places and pay for her hotels. But yeah, respect. She did a good job in this fight, I thought. Nikita Krylov versus Alexander Gustafsson was just depressing. I mean, I knew it would be rough, but it was rougher than even I expected. I think basically the first punch Nikita Krylov threw. Alexander Gustafsson he was never perfect. There were always people who didn't like him and would get mad if you said he was decent. in the analyst nerd community on Twitter, there were people who wouldn't give him a single bit of credit. But he was pretty fast, especially for a man of his size. And he had pretty decent hands for a man of his size. And he could take a whopping shot. You watch DC loading up those bus driver uppercuts on him. Whoop, wrong soundboard. And he just takes him on the chin. But he's got so slow. He's slowed down so much. He's wasted so much time. He retired because he had some rough losses, like the Rumble one. And then he came back at heavyweight for no reason. And then he took another 2 years off, and then he came back at light heavyweight. So, he just looks awful. I don't know what the answer is, because I'm not going to say he should box or do bare knuckle or whatever. And he's not an amazing grappler, so I'm not going to say do grappling competition. I think he just needs to move into a coaching/training for fun part of his career. Because Nikita Krylov isn't great, and Nikita Krylov blew him out here. Paddy Pimblett versus Jordan Leavitt was a lot of fun. I expected this one to be fun, and it was a lot of fun. And I expected this one to be scrambly and there to be lots of weird front headlock stuff. And there was. We talked about the top of the sprawl, higher ground, I think Barrett Yoshida calls it, where you sprawl on someone, instead of having the head and arm in a front headlock, you have both your arms behind their arms or over their shoulders. So you're doing like a body lock over their arms. And I said that's the position you hit weird reverse triangles and judo triangles from. And Jordan Leavitt actually scored one of those a couple of fights ago. And then, wouldn't you know it, Paddy Pimblett gets to that position and starts looking for his weird judo triangle. So that was cool. Leavitt was weirdly teeping and not really throwing hands on the feet. But I thought it was a smart enough idea, because Pimblett, not a good technician on the feet, but good kicks and powerful punches. And I don't think Leavitt had the power to sort of trade with him. And someone's going to catch him with his chin in the air and really hurt him, but I don't think Leavitt was the guy to do that. Leavitt was attempting to take down along the fence in the second round, and Paddy Pimblett had his arm inside of Leavitt's head, cross-facing him as you want to make some separation or pull him up into a clinch. And Pimblett reached all the way through and figure forward his arms into basically an arm triangle, but from behind Leavitt. It was a really weird position that you don't see a lot, and I'm sure it hurt, but it looked like Leavitt had to address it. He started moving different, he started letting go and moving, and that was when Pimblett kneed him in the head, transitioned to his back. In the course of transitioning to the back, he managed to get his legs over Leavitt's arm, which is obviously a huge part of the no-gi meta nowadays. But in addition to that, he figure forward his legs over the arm, which is just a nightmare. You know, if you get your arm trapped from the back, you've got to free your arm and then address the choke. If you get your arm trapped and they do the body triangle over the top of it, you've got to unlock the body triangle, then free your arm, then deal with the choke. So you've got a lot to do in the time that it takes them to try and strangle you. So it was a really good performance from Paddy, and for all the being a dickhead that he does most of the time, I thought his post-fight interview, really moved me. I had to take a minute to get back to being cynical about this shitty-ass card. He talked about how he lost his friend in the week due to suicide, and the stigma around men seeking help or someone to talk to. And then he did another interview later with Adam from Fight Disciples. Fuck, what's his last name? But yeah, it was a really good interview. Adam just let him talk, and he set him off. He said, about losing your friend, and Paddy just went off, very emotional. And that's what people like. People like someone who's real, even if you're a gobby dickhead. Even if you're being a gobby dickhead and you're real, people enjoy that. People enjoyed that about McGregor. He was a gobby dickhead and arrogant and flawed, but he also clearly had a great passion for MMA. He was making it work. He'd given up his actual job to pursue this thing that there was no money in. It was unthinkable for anyone to make any money in it. And, that was really quite endearing, even if you didn't agree with things he was saying or you thought he was a dickhead. And then it got worse as he was trying to put on a performance and just repeating lines that he'd written down the night before, or giving up altogether and just shouting bitch over to Floyd Mayweather over and over again. 2 of those 4 press conferences, if you bought tickets to it or turned up to it, all you got was them just shouting bitch at each other. So yeah, that was good. Fair play to Pimblett and McCann, because this card was sort of built around them with a load of other English fighters thrown in. Tom Aspinall also, but it was those 3. And basically everyone except Molly McCann and Paddy Pimblett let the side down in terms of, if the UFC... We rant about the UFC doing people favours when they reckon they've got a star or they want to capitalise on something. And I said, this is a fight that, Paddy Pimblett's not getting chinned in this fight. I said, they're not going to make that Ilia Topuria fight, and they're definitely not going to make it now, I promise you, because Topuria is a horrible matchup for him. But you still have to do your bit. If Conor McGregor didn't beat the brakes off Dennis Siver, I think he'd be justly thrown under the bus by the UFC. So fair play to Pimblett and McCann for doing their job. And then the main event we already covered was a disaster. Oh, sorry, Jack Hermansson versus Chris Curtis. This one's sad because I was a big Chris Curtis fan. It was weird watching his fights in the week up to this. I was going, man, he just takes the low kicks and he doesn't really care about them. And he was telling people, I take the low kicks and I don't really care about them. The problem is with taking low kicks, and he has this side-on stance, which is, has its weaknesses. One of the weaknesses of the side-on stance is that if you kick the lower leg, maybe you don't hurt them, but you'll always lift that leg off the floor a bit, just because of how they're standing. So the tap the ankle and jog out to the lead side works a treat. And that's why I jokingly called him Chris, the Nate Diaz man, Curtis. And then he flipped him off in the last round. But literally, the Nick Diaz playbook is to have horrible trouble with people just tapping your ankle and running past you because you fall so far off balance every time they kick your leg. I'm sure Chris Curtis was nowhere near going down or tapping out or whatever due to low kicks. He was not in Charles Rosa's position. But every time his foot was getting picked up and he was falling over. So, he had this horrible trouble, and Hermansson just kept going out the lead side. And he never really found a way to cut him off. I was saying Chris Curtis needs to do what Hermansson's doing with the step-up tap to the leg. You could do a nice big step-up low kick. That would cut him off too. All you really need to do is tap the leg to stop him running out the side door and to keep him in front of you for a second while you punch him. Or try to punch him. But I was looking at this going, Curtis... He's not always super impressive. Sometimes it takes him a long time and then he finds his spot. So I'll bear with it. But then about a minute into round 2, he starts doing that thing that John Lineker did against TJ Dillashaw and John Dodson. And you'll see it a lot. The moment a fighter who's following around the ring and can't cut the ring off stops and says, no, you come to me. He's lost. I know he's lost. Because I know he's out of ideas. I know he doesn't have the skills or knowledge to actually cut the ring on that guy. Yeah, poker face is important, but if you are showing that level of frustration, it means you can't catch the guy. The moment you start appealing to someone's masculinity as your last chance of getting back in the fight, you've lost. With rare exceptions, like Marc Hunt dropping his guard to make Ray Safo trade with him. I mean, he lost the fight, but he won the chance to go on in the tournament because Ray Safo was injured by the fight. But, if you ever see that, you know that the guy's out of ideas. And Curtis was out of ideas. Problem was, I then saw loads of people saying that Hermansson looked amazing. And this was kind of just what I saw from Jack Hermansson. I think the first time I saw him fight on like some London card or something like that. Just stamping side kicks to the lead leg of a southpaw, low kicks, and then running out the side door. I think this was more an indictment on a big hole in Chris Curtis than it was Jack Hermansson looking amazing. But good for him getting his win and not looking bad doing it. And he attempted to take down and failed and didn't just fall to pieces on the feet, which is a lot of the time what happens with Jack Hermansson. You saw that Marvin Vettori fight or the Jared Cannonier fight. The moment he failed to take down, his striking just suddenly becomes crap. So it was really nice that he attempted to take down, Curtis stopped him, and then he continued doing what he'd been doing without panicking or looking like a spaz. So ultimately a pretty dreadful card, and doubly sad that this is two main events back-to-back now where UFC has been Bellator. It's just, someone pissed off a gypsy at UFC headquarters or something. But Brian Ortega shoulder popping out while escaping a fairly loose armbar, and Tom Aspinall's leg popping out while landing a clean low kick. Yeah, it's always interesting to get into the philosophy of this, whether it should all be a no contest or whatever. I mean, it is a fist fight, and at the end of the day, part of a fist fight is trying to keep yourself healthy. If you punch people with crap form and break your hands to the point where you have to submit or something like that, that's on you. Keeping yourself safe and hitting people without hurting yourself, I consider also an important part of martial arts. So I suppose I have to consider injury losses, immediate injury losses, or almost immediate injury losses, fair play. But, we know nothing about this matchup still. We know nothing about whether Tom Aspinall can stop a takedown, whether he's fast enough or too fast for Curtis Blades. But we don't need to. Like I said, it's going to be a year at least before that fight's ever booked again. And then on the Bellator card, some weird shit happened. Tafik Musayev took on Sidney Outlaw. Sidney Outlaw was... The Bellator rankings are a fucking mess. Because Usman Nurmagomedov, I pointed out last in the week on Twitter that his last 5 opponents have something like 45 losses between them. And naturally, all the freaks who are, Habib adjacent, I call them. Anyone who's a little bit like Habib, who I've already praised heavily today, they just have to defend them. Habib defense squad. But dude's just getting mad and going, "Who do you want him to fight 25-0 fighters from the get-go?" And you're going, no. But it's very obvious that he's ranked number 3 in Bellator, and they couldn't find him another fighter even within their organisation within the top 10. But he made pretty easy work out of Chris Gonzalez, as expected, because that's what he's there to do. Paddy's record. Dude's be like, well, Eblen also, blah, blah, blah. And I just linked this guy, Eblen's record, and I said, Eblen got into the Bellator at 6-0. 4 people with more wins than him in every fight since, and less than 50% losing rate. That's not true of Usman. If you think Usman's 11 fights outside of major promotions, including ones where he fought people who were like 12 and 15, weren't record padding, you're an idiot. You can like a fighter and also admit that they engaged in some record padding. Anyway, Tafik Musayev, we were all very excited for him because he looked so good in the Rising tournament, and then he very quickly lost to Satoshi, so it was sort of, ooh, what's the deal here? But he came out and immediately threw like a naked overhand and knocked out Sidney Outlaw. So we still know almost nothing about how he's doing at the moment. But that was all made up for in the main event when Douglas Lima did his Bellator Tyron Woodley, didn't throw a strike. Jason Jackson, I keep being confused by the fact he's called the ass-kicking machine, and then I remember why I can't remember any of his fights, even though I've watched some of them. He's not very interesting. Dreadful 25-minute fight, even on the week where they could have stolen the shine from the UFC. Nope, nothing to report. And if you do want to see something good this weekend from British MMA, friend of the podcast, George Hardwick. The Hardwick boys are always great fun, stalwarts of the UK MMA scene. But George Hardwick's interesting because he got a Bellator fight when Bellator just needed some British fighters. He fought Richard, whatever his name is, who MVP fought, like the fight before that. Easily beat him because he's a good fighter. And then Bellator didn't seem to want him anymore. So he went back to Cage Warriors and he earned his title shot. And then last Friday night, he won the title by body shots in the 4th round. Or by body shots en route to stoppage in the 4th round. So if you want to watch something fun, there's your man. And his brother Harry is also great fun. People who be switching stances and hitting bodies will always be my boy. But I reckon that'll do us for today. I'm going to be back in the week with my preview of this hilarious-looking UFC pay-per-view. I'm not going to shit on it because I said this card looked great. So, sometimes it's the pay-per-views that don't have the interesting-looking fights that produce, anything better than this card. But we will be back to talk about that. If you want to keep up with I didn't write a breakdown this week because there was fucking nothing to break down. I thought about doing Nathaniel Wood. Maybe I will sometime this week, but if you want to keep up on my breakdowns, the extra pods, and the advanced striking studies and other articles I write, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com, and if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack, going to the next UFC London in 2024. Bless.